Yeah, welcome to Sprengel Talks, a more precise How to Survive Talks, the series of events organized along the exhibition How to Survive Art as Survival Strategy at Sprengel Museum Hannover. And today we are joined by Zairong Xiang. Please, can you say something for a brief moment so everybody can see you?
Hi everyone.
Okay, before I introduce him, a few words regarding technicality. So thank you for joining via Zoom. At the moment, all the microphones and videos are deactivated. After the talk, I will start the discussion and open it for everyone here. And you can post questions via chat or turn on your camera and make a sign, and hopefully me or our technical moderator Mario will notice you and recall you. My name is Paula Schwerdtfeger. I am curatorial assistant to Karina Plath, who curated the exhibition How to Survive, also with the assistance of Olga Nevzorova, who introduced today's speaker to us in the first place. Zairong Xiang is assistant professor of comparative literature at Duke Kunshan University in China, where he is also associate director of arts, a new position as far as I know, in which he creates and organizes artists program on campus. Before, he was a fellow at ICE Berlin, the Institute for Cultural Inquiry from 2014 to 2016, followed by a postdoc fellowship at Potsdam University in the DFG project Minor Cosmopolitanisms. In 2018, he published the book Queer Ancient Ways, Decolonial Exploration, which can be downloaded from his very fine website, which I recommend. In his research, to quote that book, he advocates a profound unlearning of colonial/modern categories. He works in the concept of transdualism, which is rooted in the studies of queer and feminist theories, as well as in his deep knowledge of several languages and cultures. He edited and curated several programs, publications, and also exhibitions. The next project is, as far as I know, the exhibition Y Collectivity at Guangzhou Image Triennale this March. So please enjoy and welcome Zairong Xiang, and we are really excited to have you here.
Thank you, Paula. First of all, I want to thank everyone who have made this event possible, especially Paula, Karina, Olga, Mario, and other people that I probably don't know name. Also, I hope you all stay safe and healthy. And by the way, Happy New Year of the Ox. We're still in vacation here in China. Initially, this was going to be a perfect time for me to travel back to Germany, but let's see when this will happen. Okay, so I will share my slides. Okay. Good. So part one, bourgeois austerity. The boiler in my Berlin apartment refused to heat up the water starting in May last year. Meanwhile, COVID-19 had long been categorized a pandemic, and the shit show seemed to have come down a little bit by then. You all know how big corporate Hausverwaltung works nowadays. They are always punctual when collecting the rent, but never there when you actually need them. It took another 2 months for the technician to come and fix the boiler. I was not exactly furious because I didn't want any stranger to come to my apartment during a pandemic. Anyway, the only inconvenience is no hot water to take a shower. And due to lockdown, the gym where I used to take showers and most of the time, or sauna or public swimming pools were all closed. To take shower at a friend's was a possibility, but social distancing there, social distancing. So not really an option either. My small apartment rented in bourgeois Prenzlauer Berg, Berlin was turned inhospitable due to the malfunction of a simple yet essential detail. Although no one really needs to take a shower every day, it gradually became uncomfortable with the warmer weather. How to survive this? Empty the IKEA trash bin, clean the bucket previously used to rest the sourdough, the coffee mug, boil the water with the teapot to 100 degrees. Pour half of the boiling water into the IKEA trash bin. Mix it with cold water from the pipe. Use the other half and mix it with cold water in a bucket. The coffee mug can be used as a ladle, like a big spoon. Squat. Don't sit on the floor. Even in summer, it'd be too cold and would unnecessarily dirty your ass. 1 or 2 mugs of water are sufficient for getting the whole body wet, including hair. Apply shampoo and soap, rinse and done. You would normally still have some water left to have a final delicious pour of warm water from head to toe. None of these items are completely essential for survival. We don't really need an IKEA trash bin to collect garbage. A hausgemachtes Sauerbrot can be made without a plastic bucket too. And a coffee mug is probably the only thing that is more or less essential for survival, not the coffee pot though. What astonished me in repeating this common practice of childhood when the majority of households in China didn't have their own shower was how little water we actually need for performing the basic cleansing ritual of the body. 1.5 trash bin of water was what I put to waste in order to wait for the hot water to come out in a normal day when the boiler was working. Despite the broken boiler, the lockdown was largely pleasant, I'd say. I wrote down a text reflecting on our so-called freedom in quarantine, arguing against the fascinating but utterly worrying tendency that was seen among angry public intellectuals and on the streets of Berlin included. What came to be known as the Corona-Lügen or Corona conspiracy theory was able to unite people from across the political spectrum to come out and paranoidly defend what they all respectively saw as an infringement of freedom. I had to enter the confessional mode in the text, so I wrote in the text freedom in quarantine. Some of us have the luxury and indeed privilege of sitting comfortably in our homes or home offices. What I do now is not very different from what I did before the pandemic. The inner monk of me secretly enjoys the complete freedom from social obligations, from attending boring meetings, from shouting to be heard in loud bars, from the FOMO, the fear of missing out, I used to feel. The Chinese person of me is also secretly thankful for the complete freedom from the minor aggressions in public space that could at any point escalate into physical attack. The ecologist in me secretly entertains the hope that one of these evenings, when I walk 3 blocks down my neighborhood supermarket, a wild boar or an inquisitive fox from the Brandenburg forest will be 2 feet away from me. We will stare at each other for the first time in both of our lives, meeting for the first time, although we have long been coexisting on this planet. But of course, this was and is not about me. My small discomfort showering using trash bin and a sourdough bucket was nothing compared to the daily tragedy unfolding across the world. Like many of my friends back home, I used to think of Western Europe as a place without poverty. Austerity was also only imposed on the southern states until the COVID debacle. And I quote from the text, I continue to quote from the text. One evening, instead of seeing a fox or a boar, I noticed a billboard bearing phrases written on a little piece of paper. One of them reads, "My father drinks more ever since the social distancing started, and he has become more aggressive," by Tobias B. Another reads, My family has only one computer and the library is closed, by Sophia P. The other, my mother works at a supermarket and I have to look after my sister, by Julius N. None of these authors invoked that magic and the abstract word freedom. Maybe precisely because they don't even have the privilege of staying at home and comfortably complaining about our quarantined freedom. Because they are workers in occupations only recently deemed essential. Because they are among those who have sustained our allegedly last freedom all along. They refer to some of the complex social issues that have been affected by the lockdown measures: toxic masculinity and the domestic violence against women and children, unequal access to knowledge and the illusion of digital ubiquity, social reproduction, and feminized precarious labor. Part 2, flamboyant proposal. I'm sure we are all tired of listening to endless corona-related reflections and rants. I will stop here for a second and talk about a different proposal from austerity. After all, the majority of the world has long experienced and continue to experience what the small prosperous portion of the world's rich populations had only a very insignificant taste of, thanks to the pandemic. Let's first look at something fun, an excerpt from artist Wombo's film, China Concerto.
There are images I don't know how to explain. Could you believe what I saw? A rotating Christ the Redeemer. The Statue of Liberty. A group of Chinese people dancing in front of Mount Rushmore. And a group of Ethiopians singing on the Great Wall. I might need to acknowledge that the world is really globalized. I guess that could be my conclusion after seeing all of these images. Of course, nothing was so simple. The Great Wall they stood on was just a simulation. They sang in Chinese, but none of them really spoke Chinese. The country claims to be communist, but it has been pushing capitalization for the past 2 decades. Nothing was quite what it looked like, and that's what I can say about this trip so far. Everything is ambiguous and uncertain.
Shanzai, used initially as a name for counterfeit mobile phones that were very common and popular in China in the early 2000s. Now, talking about Shanzai, at least in its meaning of bricolage, mobile phones seem to be already quite old-fashioned. With its rapid disappearance in China, Shanzai can still widely be seen burgeoning, especially across the so-called global south. Inside China, if Shanzai mobile to be found, other Shanzai products and the phenomenon continues their life in one way or the other. Especially in the economically less well-off communities or poorer regions or neighborhoods of the metropolis. It has become a standard survival strategy across the damnée de la terre. For example, these 2 apples. The left one was found on an old bed in my hometown Guiyang. The second one in the toilet of a local cured meat restaurant in the ethnic Miao and Dong autonomous region of the province. Both feature the icon of an apple with a bite. I imagine almost everyone is able to recognize in the image the famous logo of the US technology company Apple, but perhaps fewer would be familiar with eye sheet or eye flush. But why did an apple with a bite taken out of it become the exclusive property of Macintosh, which often seems necessary to remind its consumers, designed by Apple in California, assembled in China. Some speakers of Shanzhai by drawing comparison with the action of English folk hero Robin Hood, a form of resistance carried out by and for common people, stealing from the rich, so to speak. But the toilet in the cured meat restaurant seems far less daring a venture than the activity of Chow Yun-fat's character in the film A Better Tomorrow, or called Qualities of a Hero, who set fire to counterfeit dollar notes bearing the face of Benjamin Franklin. In the entrenched imaginary of high-end, so-called high-end globalization and its tactics of promulgation, even this bold form of Shanzhai looks to be no more than a Chinese imitation of Robin Hood. So whether it's Shanzhai Robin Hood or Shanzhai Apple toilets, Shanzhai seemed unconcerned with justifying its actions, let alone acts of heroism. Is it right then to understand Shanzhai insofar as the objects of its mimicry are the expensive brand reserved for the first world or higher classes as a desire to transcend class boundaries? As it is often said of those who buy fake Louis Vuitton products, are they not simply poor people who want to pass off as rich? The Shanzhai industry, at least in the early 21st century, can be understood as a form of redistribution of capital. The workers in the global factory who assemble iPhones are also those ones who assemble the high phone they and their companions could afford. There is a certain amount of truth to this interpretation, but it is rather too serious. There are a variety of derivative brands that elicit no small amount of ridicule, from the Shanzhai Apple phone that swapped the Apple for a gay-friendly pear, or a dazzling variation of McDonald's and KFC with a twist. Mr. Marmot is clearly a solution to this problem. Besorgte Burger bei uns nicht. Only that this is only a photoshopped photo circulated on the German-speaking media. Purportedly, McDonald's stands against Alternative für Deutschland. Perhaps the only work that tries to theorize Shanzhai as theory, Byung-Yun Han's insightful philosophical treatise, Shanzhai Dekonstruktion auf Chinesisch, nonetheless at times struggle to conceal its Orientalist tendencies. There is an overemphasis in the work on the East-West divide in its consideration of Shanzhai, and Han succumbs to a certain myth about the so-called originality and innovativeness to mount a defense of Shanzhai, to the extent that his discussion departs from its philosophical basis to end on a Saccarian note of democratic hope. Such an approach might rob Shanzhai of its most essential features: ambiguity, illegitimacy, and indifference to only meta-narrative. Simply put, Shanzhai is indifferent to either anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist struggle or a quest of democracy. In truth, the rise of Shanzhai occurred in an age in which the language of anti-imperialism, anti-capitalism, or class struggle had lost almost all of its power. Shanzhai's relationship with global capitalism is far more ambiguous. Nor is it very innovative as one would have expected following the wonderful yet nonetheless rare example laid out in Han's book. The creative surplus is limited. You don't really find many products like the Louis Vuitton toilet or the harmony between Apple and Android, suspicious of having reproduced a hybrid baby. Most Shanzhai products are actually ordinary and banal copies, fake Chanel belts and Burberry underwears. Even in the cases where Shanzhai product is a copy of a prototype that doesn't exist, this creative surplus that distinguishes from the design framework from which it emerged is usually very limited. In the southern megapolis, Chongqing, a now closed theme park called Yangrenjie, or the Foreigner's Street, which is the one of the Christ the Redeemer and the replica of the Great Wall that we've seen, is from that park in Wombo's film. A group of in that park, a group of local aunties dressed up as the anti-Japanese soldiers of the 8th Route Army staged a dance of anti-Japanese imperialism on the 1st of September 2014. This is 69 years after the Japanese surrender in World War II. What is quite remarkable is that they were performing in front of the so-called Golden Reception Hall, 金色大厅, the Golden Hall of Vienna Musikverein, and its very humble conceptual replica. And on the Austrian-style church on the right side, where a banner could be found. It reads, 我是谁? 我来自哪里? 要到哪去? Who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? So I take back what I said earlier, that Shanzhai does not engage in an earnest act of anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist struggle. Similarly, at the heart of the once capital of Shanzhai, the city of Shenzhen, still stands a theme park named Window of the World, a gigantic site of Shanzhai that today still sees crowds of tourists willing to spend 120 yuan, that's around 10 euros, for a ticket. For many, it is still the only way they will be able to encounter these great monuments of civilization. Of course, why should other cultures be ostensibly presented by monuments, albeit in miniature, is a serious question that we won't discuss today. The visitors are migrant workers on the assembly line of the world's factory, who, according to Apple's famous line, assemble global capitalism. They use a hard-earned day off to take visiting relatives to see the world. The Eiffel Tower sits alongside the Pantheon and the Pyramid of ancient Egypt, while to the south, the so-called global lower end stands a somewhat out of proportion Michelangelo's David. No judgment is passed on question of East-West, real or fake. Just as the jumbled view of Shenzhen's window of the world transcends the modern colonial binary of South and North, East and West, the high and the low, the real and the fake, so too does Shanzhai.
Okay, offenbar haben wir ein kleines technisches Problem und wir hören den Speaker gerade nicht mehr. Ich versuche ihn zu kontaktieren. Ah, there you are again. We didn't hear you.
Oh, you lost me?
Yeah.
From where?
I think
Until when?
like I got trapped in this technicality, but I think the last thing I was able to capture was that you say like this is a park where people come, that are migrant workers, and they travel the world from this place.
Ah, okay.
And
good,
maybe you can, yeah, start with this again.
Okay.
I don't know
No
the
problem.
precise moment
Yeah,
when people, because I think for some it started earlier. Okay, I will mute me again.
Okay, thank you. Similarly, at the heart of the once capital of Shanzhai, the city of Shenzhen, still stands a theme park named Window of the World, a gigantic site of Shanzhai that today still sees crowds of tourists willing to spend 120 yuan, that is around 10 euros, for a ticket. For many, it is still the only way they will be able to encounter this great monument of civilization. Of course, Why should other cultures be ostensibly represented by monuments, albeit in miniature, is a serious question that we want to discuss today. The visitors are migrant workers on the assembly lines of the world's factory, who, according to Apple's famous line, assemble global capitalism. They use a hard-earned day off to take visiting relatives to see the world. The Eiffel Tower sits alongside the Pantheon and the myriad pyramids of ancient Egypt, while to the south of the park, the so-called lower end, stands somewhat out of proportion Michelangelo's David. No judgment is passed on questions of East, West, real or fake. Just as the jumbled view of Shenzhen's window of the world transcends the modern colonial binary of South and North, East and West, the high and the low, the real and the fake, so too does Shanzhai's worldview pay little notice to such value-laden divisions, not because they are kept afar from the globalized world, frequently imagined as and represented by glittering skyscrapers and antiseptic jet setters crossing the borders at ease, but because the transcendence of border was the first-hand experience of the underbelly of globalization. The Pearl River Delta, where Shenzhen and its Shanzhai products are located, has a long relationship with the world. It is at the center of colonial modernity, not its Shanzhai margin, and even less some inferior imitation. In the 19th century, during the high point of capitalist colonialism, the term globalization has always put too positive a spin on the process. Chinese workers, the majority of whom from the southern province of Guangdong and Fujian, supplied their labor alongside enslaved African and Indian workers in the cotton fields of tobacco factories of Cuba, Peru, Mexico, the USA, and other countries in the Americas, the beacon of modern colonial capitalist globalization. The globalized world we know today was built by means of their exploited bodies and souls as they toiled in the part of the world that formed the dark side of colonial globalization. Today, the world continues to flourish on the back of labor carried out in the factories of China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and Mexico, in Western metropolis by people largely from racialized immigrant background. The pandemic has made this crystal clear. This transcendence of category is of course not limited to Pearl River Delta in China. If Shanzhai is nonetheless plugged in more or less directly with global capitalism and the production chain, its sister version elsewhere in the broader global south embody even better this pervasive connectivity between things, a cosmic order, no less. Part 3, how to survive, who survive. Applying adhesive tape to exposed wire to act as an insulator, using a sheet of wood for a car door, using a real apple to act as the Apple logo, turning a supermarket push cart over to use as a barbecue grid. So the so-called vulgar solutions such as these are commonplace in communities in precarious situations. Gambiarra, a Brazilian concept roughly meaning the reassembly of available materials when resources are limited. Gambiarra allows for simultaneous and contrived connections between all manners of objects. In Mexico, artist Abraham Cruz Villegas calls similar collective wisdom of creation and creativity out of scarcity, autoconstrucción, and has worked on a long-term project with the same name. India's Jugaad is another example. The root of the word, which in Hindi is even more explicit, it means connection. Jugaad, connection, becomes ironically the only solution one has in time of pandemic scarcity, to construct isolation. These solutions have mainstreamed this quick fix, especially as neoliberalism has severely impoverished the public health system. These photos are taken from early February when the epidemic was at its peak in China. Medical workers didn't have enough PPE, personal protective equipment, and had to use normal raincoat or no protection at all. These otherwise funny photos quickly slide into despair when medical workers are left dying on the front line. Who would have expected that the same story would repeat itself across the world immediately in the months to come as the epidemic became a pandemic? History repeats itself immediately, first as a farce, then as tragedy. Lurking behind what appears to be a temporary last resort solution is in fact a way of thinking that is fundamentally at odds with a modern colonialist ontology that assumes the absolute boundaries between things. The experience of being subject to and resisting colonialism is based on a kind of hybrid and vulnerable openness. With the rise of populism and the explosion of isolationist politics across the contemporary world, exacerbated by the current pandemic, this openness might be as dangerous as it is a survival strategy. Openness itself is not inherently positive. It is, after all, the modus operandi of global neoliberal capitalism. The reason for the quick expansion of the coronavirus into a severe pandemic. The underground experience and knowledge located in the so-called vulgar solutions of Shanja Gambiaha, Autoconstruction, and Jugat is that of a transcending onto-epistemology that is permitted on and also enacting the profound connectivity of the myriad things. The rejection of or indifference to absolute notions of correct and false, high and low, left and right, arising from a mixture of overlapping histories and a practice that is oriented towards what is yet to come and yet to be known. The Shanja Gambiaha Jugat Autoconstruction universe cannot be subject to the distinction between practice and theory, or other binary distinctions such as north-south, east-west, man-woman, secular, religious, high-low, and real-fake. This refusing to be subjected to does not equate to resistance or deconstruction, but is rooted in the ordinary exuberance and the flamboyant creativity, even in the direst of situation. It is not a heroic act of rebellion, but a kind of inversion, an undercurrent internal to the theory practice of all things in connection is that of the ethics of the all permissible. I want to end today's talk, How to Survive Two Proposals from Austerity, from this unhopeful note, lest any of the previous theses sounds as if on the verge of celebration. Quick fix as survival strategy is by itself apolitical, meaning that the practice of Gambiaha and alike aim first and foremost not as a political project of resistance, albeit expect its effect to be so. Unlike the romantic theorization of them as some sort of subaltern heroism, it is part and parcel of global capitalism. Its underdog notwithstanding. What is more, it could even be complicit with capitalism and its mechanism of exploitation, not because it endorses capitalism, but because under the tyranny of algorithm, one can no longer afford to resist. In the case of the delivery workers, venturing against traffic to accelerate delivery speed to catch up with the ever-shrinking time allocated to each delivery. Every quick fix they come up with to bypass traffic regulation and urban standardization has claimed numerous lives. Artist Mao Zhenyu has followed how algorithmic capitalism has sucked up the body's flesh and bone of the delivery workers, extract their time and even life for the continuous flourishing of capitalism, which he calls spectral time. Similarly, we would consider cynically that during the COVID-19 lockdown, what they mean by essential workers is that workers in logistics, supermarket, and other service industry are ultimately essential for the working of capitalism. In the early days of the pandemic, and in many cases throughout the whole process, essential frontline workers have been asked to improvise production gear, to utilize their Gambiaha-like knowledge of quick fix, not to resist, but to keep the system that oppressed them working in the name of saving lives. And that's with that very unhopeful note, thank you very much. That's the end of the talk.
Well, thank you very much for this interesting 3-step, 4-step journey through austerity. I need to collect my thoughts for a moment.
I saw Karina has the hand raised.
Oh yeah, okay, then Mario, maybe you can let her join the conversation. Karina Plath is somewhere.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Super. Thank you, Zairong, so for this very inspiring lecture. It was really great because it has to do so much with the artists also in the show. And I found especially intriguing how you get kind of a twist to globalism, you know, this idea of everything being connected that we have in the show also with Shusaku Arakawa now becomes something where people are connected in this improvisation, which comes out of a misery or out of a difficult situation somehow. And so you close hopeful, but for me, it's like when I hear it, I say, well, there are certain cultures which have a different, you know, who know better how to help themselves because they have already learned it for a long time. Perhaps, you know, like in Germany, because people are so rich, they don't know how to do it. But on the other hand, of course, it is in its banality that you also described, like a very helpless reaction to globalism and to this pandemic. Perhaps you could elaborate or say something to how you personally feel about it. That would be interesting for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Karina. I received the invitation from you guys quite early on, right? From last year, and it was something that I was thinking about, and then this boiler thing happened in my apartment, and out of despair, really, immediately I remembered that's how I took shower as a kid, right? So there was some knowledge that really was from this kind of situation of austerity, if we can call that, on one hand, and then on the way of me moving back to China, and I had to go through quarantine upon arrival here. And this 14 days quarantine in a really terrible hotel. There was practically no service, right? Room service to avoid any kind of cross contamination or anything. So they only give you the standard utilities for normally for 1 night in a hotel. And notice I didn't put that photo in the PowerPoint, but I noticed how much that soap can last. It really lasted 14 days. A soap that we only use once, twice, in some as the level of the hotel goes up, they always change the soap, right? Every day they give you a new one, and that's completely wasteful. And at the same way, how I notice with the one dustbin and half of water that I often waste to wait for the hot water to come out. The same idea. So this thing really brought me to think of this kind of if we can call it survival strategy, or basically daily practice, right? The banal daily practice that that could really imagine if everyone started to shower like that, how much water we can save, right? Along these lines. So yeah.
Thank you.
I was really interested by your claim that these improvising actions have something that's apolitical. So it's not a resistance, but it's a survival gear. So it's a practice to survive. And you said it's connected to global capitalism as it is undermining it, but it's also complicit. You also, if I understand correctly, said this is sort of the more precarious workers who would need to do this practice, and not like maybe like we are now talking about it. And so for me, the question would be that if it's apolitical, if it's not a practice of resistance in a political sense, do you think there's a change possible of this dualism and this division of being able to staying at home, as you said, and being the ones who need to improvise in order to survive the daily struggle? Is there a way we can go around this, or work together, or connect these social divisions?
Yeah, thank you for the question. That I'm pessimistic, right? That's why I changed the order of the ending. The ending originally ends with the all permissible ethics arising from our connectivity, but seeing today, it's so not the right tone. The improvisation really is at once a strategy of survival, kind of a fuck you to certain kind of standardized way of being, but at the same time it fits into the system, right? The delivery guy example is so this was a debate that was happening like 2-3 months ago in China. There are some so now the whole economy is very much rely on logistic, so a lot of delivery from here and there, and some delivery there are a lot of cases of delivery guy basically got hit by a car because they go against the flow, right? And the reason behind that was really those platforms reduce their delivery time shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, right? So this kind of quick fix that they came up with is life-threatening. But at the same time, it's also on the surface, it might be like they are against the urban standardization or something, right? But deep down, it is feeding into the system. The system can go shorter and shorter on the one hand. On the other hand, what is the way out? I guess I always say we need to learn from the below, right? But I hesitate to say that now as well, because how much will that be further appropriated? So there are some literature on Jugaad and Gambiaha, especially Jugaad, that was able to turn the whole thing into the most neoliberal management book possible, of thinking basically to say, how can you exploit your worker better, give them less and then ask them to improvise. So it's very tricky, right? The between the phenomena and how to think about it. Yeah. So I have no solution.
Yeah, no, I
to put it short.
Well, if you had, that would be great. But it was just an interesting thought. Maybe we can open the discussion some more. If anybody wants to join some. Yeah, I think this what Stefan Kaps wrote in the chat also connects to what you just said. The movement of the trend of DIY and go back to the homemade or handmade actually. And the context of sustainability, like you said, like for example, how long can the soap last, or how earlier in your talk you mentioned home baked bread, I think. Yeah. And yeah, but in the end, does this connect to the exploitation of these kind of improvisations again? Because the DIY, I don't know, this is not what Stefan wrote, but I just there's an exhibition at the moment near here, and there's an
let me show you maybe
yeah.
the photo. I found the photo. This is actually the soap after 14 days.
It's quite a lot.
It's quite a lot left.
Or maybe this is the chance that we all need to, like, not just the workers need to improvise, but we all need to like start to bake or question, like you said, like we need to rethink or unlearn the standard way of living, maybe, or
I guess maybe
thinking.
we can.
So, and I think maybe this pandemic forces us to unlearn certain standards in a let's say more practical way than the philosophy way would be to reconsider and then change actions. We need to change actions first.
Yeah, I guess maybe we can say some people's improvisation, put in differently, improvisation by different people from different background leads to different results.
Yeah.
So I don't, I wouldn't oh, now we all have to live in austerity, right? We all know how terrible it is living in austerity. So that's not the that's not what we, so it cannot be universalized, basically. I mean,
Yeah.
it really have to come from different positions.
Mhm.
Is there still a little bit time for one question from my side?
Yes, we still have time, like a little.
Okay. So first of all, thank you so much for this super interesting and wonderful talk. And I just like have a small comment or maybe a question to something you said quite in the beginning of the talk when you mentioned that you kind of enjoyed this like social media detox and have more this like, yeah, quiet life. And for me, it was really like the opposite because my using of social media was already before quite a lot, I would say, and then I would say went through the roof. So, and I think it's a general thing I'm observing here because we never had so many digital historical records of the situation and this crisis, and sharing feelings and thoughts are so well documented documented and shared globally. Of course, it's interesting to ask like who's sharing what and why. And my question is, or I'm asking myself, will this like global synchronization of this digital historical records will diffuse into, let's call it, the more traditional art forms? So museums, for example, will, or artists can use it or will use it in the future exhibitions as material. What do you think about?
Yeah, thank you, Olga, for the question and thoughts. So maybe I didn't say it clearly. I didn't say I was enjoying the detox from social media, but from socializing, from physical
Okay.
socializing. From the FOMO,
Yes.
living in Berlin, you constantly feel FOMO, fear of missing out. There's always something going on, right? So somehow but that was in the context of the text I wrote called Freedom in Quarantine, right? That was really an argument against this immediate outcry against any kind of lockdown measures or stay at home call for stay at home, including there are some angry rants from public intellectuals to ask us to turn off the internet and not feed into the, of course that's the irony, right, not feed into the algorithmic capitalism. But I was actually in that piece, I was actually arguing not for, but I said thanks to social media, people could still keep in touch. I experienced the longest lockdown, right? Because the shit show already started in China in February. So I was very attentive through social media, connecting with family and friends here. And then the wheel turned, and then I was in lockdown, and I was still in connection with also my friends across Europe, right? So yes to social media in that particular context. But I was just saying I was enjoying, ironically, I was enjoying the detox from social life as a ironic argument against those quick outcry of our freedom is being compromised.
Okay, then it was maybe my bad internet connection. I'm sorry about that. But still, yeah, just like this global connection we have and this documentation of of our situation, in my opinion, it will have like a huge impact of how future or artists in the future will perceive this situation, this crisis, and also find its ways to art and cultural institutions.
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe I can get in here because I would like to ask you, Zairong, about this exhibition you plan in the March and the Triennial, and because the title and or the topic is collectivity, and so I was wondering how, like in the time where the common action here, at least, is in the West to conquer the coronavirus is isolation. And now you said like social media is connecting, but how do you work with other people on a exhibition on collectivity, and now in this pandemic? And is this meant as a also solution for the pandemic, or this is? I mean, we don't have so much time left, but I found it really interesting to have this topic now.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. We work like this, right? through, through Zoom, we started to plan this show when I was still in Berlin, and now the situation in China is actually quite back to normalcy. So you can hope soon this will also be, so there is hope, basically, I'm saying. Otherwise the question really emerged from the pandemic, right? We don't want to address the pandemic tel quel, right? It wouldn't be very interesting. Everybody is corona fatigue now, as we are all Zoom fatigue. But collectivity really emerged as a very strong concept and phenomenon, even if we are all in lockdown. For example, this in the beginning, right? There was this global concert. Everybody logging to look at concert. There was whatever speech by. Normally, I don't listen to politicians speak, right? But also my friends in Berlin, I think we never listened any speech by Angela Merkel, but this time we did, right? So so in this kind of situation, you form different forms of collectivity. So we want to investigate, basically, what kind of form of collectivity that is still thinkable or is emerging from the current situation. An exhibition could be seen as a form of temporary collectivity. The way we work, we are a curatorial collectivity, right? The way we work, how we decide on things is another format of our relationship with artists, with the institution, right? And here, by institution, there are so many different levels. How to do this, and also there is also the excluded collectivity, right? What gets present, what is for anyone who watched this on YouTube, not synchronously, but later on, that forms a different kind of constellation that would be interesting to investigate. But we just threw the question, right? We really wanted our artists to help us to think this collectively about this very important, at the same time lacking but extremely present phenomenon of collective.
Yeah, and it's been great to have this like temporary collective here in our Zoom meeting, I think, for this talk. And also on a side note, I would really like to give to your notice the talk Karina Plath had with Koki Tanaka, a Japanese artist who's also like really much working on this, like the question on how crisis changes societies in general, but also like forms of collectivity. And yeah, so maybe this is, yeah, a blunt, I don't know, PR for our series, but yeah, thank you so much for your time, and yeah, Happy New Year, and I hope you enjoy the time you have now, with a little days off, and thank you everybody for joining, and yeah, see you soon.
Thank you. And thank you, Stefan Caps, for all the notes. Thank you very much. I copy paste them and I will look at them later. Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Happy New Year.